Hare Krishna and welcome to Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam class. We continue in the 4th canto, chapter 20, entitled Lord Vishnu's Appearance in the Sacrificial Arena, text number 5. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Ata, therefore, Kayam, body, Imam, this, Vidvan, he who has knowledge, Avidya, by nescience, Kama, desires, karma bihi, and by activities, arabtaha, created, iti, thus, na, never, eva, certainly, asmin, to this body, bradibuddhaha, one who knows, anusachate, becomes addicted. Translation and purport by Sri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Those who are in full knowledge of the bodily conception of life, who know that this body is composed of nescience, desires and activities resulting from illusion, do not become addicted to the body. Purport. As stated in the previous verse, those with good intellect, Sudhiya, do not accept themselves to be the body. Being a creation of nescience, the body has two types of activities. In the bodily conception, when we think that sense gratification will help us, we are in illusion. Another kind of illusion is to think that one will become happy by trying to satisfy the desires that arise from the illusory body, or by attaining elevation to the higher planetary systems, or by performing various types of Vedic rituals. This is all illusion. Similarly, material activities performed for political emancipation and social and humanitarian activities performed with an idea that people of the world will be happy are also illusory, because the basic principle is the bodily conception, which is illusory. Whatever we desire or perform under the bodily conception is all illusion. In other words, Lord Vishnu informed Prithu Maharaj that although the sacrificial performances set an example for ordinary people, there was no need for such sacrificial performances as far as his personal self was concerned. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 2.45, Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna Nitvandvo Nityasatvasto Niryogakshema Atmavan. The Vedas mainly deal with the subject of the three modes of material nature. Rise above these modes, O Arjuna. Be transcendental to all of them. Be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. The ritualistic performances recommended in the Vedas mainly depend on the three modes of material nature. Consequently, Arjuna was advised to transcend the Vedic activities. The activities Arjuna was advised to perform were the transcendental activities of devotional service. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swabrantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vagishayasya Vadane Lakshmiryasya Chavakshasi Yasya De Hridaye Samvit Tam narasimham aham bhaje pralada hridayaladam bhakta vitya vidaram sharatindurachim vande pavindra vandanam harim. Those who are in full knowledge of the bodily conception of life, who know that this body is composed of nations, desires and activities resulting from illusion, do not become addicted to the body. I would like to have a short, look back and read the other 4 shlokas, because we are in a situation where Lord Vishnu appeared in the sacrificial arena of King Prithu and started to speak, and like this kind of a whole, chain of argumentation, and just that we have again the connection to the other few statements, which are very much similar. Just give me a second. I forgot to open that tab. Maybe just like this. So here the chapter starts. The great sage Maitreya continued, "My dear reader, being very much satisfied by the performance of 99 horse sacrifices, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, appeared on the scene. Accompanying him was King Indra. Lord Vishnu then began to speak. Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said, 'My dear King Prithu, Indra, the King of Heaven, has disturbed your execution of 100 sacrifices. Now he has come with me to be forgiven by you, and therefore excuse him. O King, one who is advanced in intelligence and eager to perform welfare activities for others is considered best amongst human beings. An advanced human being is never malicious to others. Those with advanced intelligence are always conscious that this material body is different from the soul. If a personality like you, who are so much advanced because of executing the instructions of the previous acharyas, is carried away by the influence of my material energy, then all your advancement may be considered simply a waste of time.'" Another verse from today. "Those who are in full knowledge of the bodily conception of life, who know that this body is composed of nations, desires and activities resulting from illusion, do not become addicted to the body." So Vishnu himself is instructing King Prithu on some very fundamental truth that we hear very often, of course, when we practice Krishna consciousness, when we read the scriptures, because it is so essential. Srila Prabhupada used to compare this understanding with math, that if the beginning of an equation you have a wrong assumption or like an error, then your whole equation, whatever build up on it, will be wrong. So if your core assumption of, like in this case, what the self is based on an error, or like Srila Prabhupada very much highlights how there's illusion, confusing something with something it is not, or Maya, that the term saying that which is not. So if this is the basis, then everything I build up on that basis will be faulty, or like the fault will reflect in that. So therefore it is so essential to have this first fact straight. And so, but there it starts already, like, is it a fact that we are not the body, but we are a transcendental spirit soul? Can we prove that? And this is the challenge, of course, modern society and science poses. You believe that, but how is it? In fact, the soul cannot be seen. Even the Bhagavad Gita itself makes those statements that it is only actually perceived or like described in negation terms. It is not this, it is not that, it cannot die, it cannot. But it's not giving a positive identification, it is exactly that. Srila Prabhupada says, we can, of course, the symptom of the soul we can recognize, it's really a symptom. It's not the self, but consciousness is the symptom of the self, or the individual soul. Consciousness pervades our body, and we are aware of things. And on Sunday also we talked about how consciousness can be withdrawn also from the body, like in objects, and we can lose identification. And in this way also the yoga process often says negation is a very powerful tool. But Dharma, that what essentially is, also Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains, is that what cannot be negated from you. You know, like fire, you cannot negate the heat from fire, then it isn't fire. That's an essential quality that will always remain. So the self with the consciousness, Shakti or energy, is that what we focus on. And of course we have an individual personality on a spiritual platform, even a shape on a spiritual plane, but this is not visible to us yet, and we are in the process to realize that. Here the faith comes in. We accept this teaching, we accept this philosophy, and it is our faith. Although it is scientific in the sense that we have a procedure of bhakti yoga, many processes that help us gradually get advanced in spiritual life, it is though a faith, since we deal with subject matters of transcendence. The very meaning of transcendence is that which is beyond sensual perception. That's like the transcendence, above or aloof from. So therefore, we always find ourselves with the limitation of human capacity to understand and realize things. So, but the Vedas clearly affirm, or like the acharyas, who are seers of the truth. This is one important term that is also often, or like on two very significant places in the Bhagavad Gita, being highlighted, that one seeks out a person, or like a source, which is a tattvadarshi, someone who sees the truth. In the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna instructs Arjuna from where he is supposed to accept this knowledge. And he says, Na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha, ubayor avitarishtantas tvanayos tattvadarshibhihi. It's in 2:16, where it is said, those who are seers of the truth have concluded that, for example, can you go word by word, that the non-existent, means the material body, there is no endurance of it, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both. So of course we can look at this verse as, yes, we accept knowledge from authorities, or like credible sources, we must say, sources that we accept as credible, authoritative, because they have, by their processes of spiritual science, have realized that, and we accept that with faith, although we might not be able to see it exactly the same way. But we accept with faith the teaching, because if we wake up each day, and who of us truly sees his self? We have a sense of self, the I, this is always there, we cannot negate it, although some schools of thought try to do that. But even if you would try to erase, or like, dissolve yourself, how do you know you achieved it? At some point there must be a self that concludes, oh, now I have dissolved. And that's in itself contradictory. You cannot deny your own existence, or like, it's just not happening. So the self is there, the sense of self. But what it exactly is remains hidden. So that's also Srila Prabhupada mentions the material energy, of course, that has the effect that we are not able to see the self, although we are constantly, let's say, teased by its symptoms. But the body does not allow us to exactly see it. And that's the process of spiritual life, to gradually, in a literal sense, discover, or uncover gradually, our vision of self, through the process of Krishna consciousness. I said, in order to see, you need light, because your eyes need light in order to recognize something. And in Nectar of Devotion, in the beginning, Srila Prabhupada explains, self-realization works that way, and he gives a metaphor. Krishna is the sun, and in the presence of the sun, you can see things. So if you focus on trying to realize Krishna and gradually realize him, then automatically, in the light of this realization, you also realize your true self. True Krishna realization, self-realization comes. Because also the so-called monist philosophies like that focus on aspects of the self to actually not realize the full self, only aspects of it, like eternity and consciousness. But the personal identity of the self is connected to Krishna. And if I do not accept any Krishna or personal God, then I also don't accept an individual identity, which can then not be real to me, consequently. So then partially still the self can be realized. So this is one thing that we accept from credible sources, but at the same time also we are encouraged to become philosophers and scientists ourselves. Srila Prabhupada says that in the Upanishad in text 10, where the shloka is like that the effects of knowledge are different than the effects of ignorance, vidya and avidya. And he actually summarizes the verses from the, I think, 13th chapter, Bhagavad Gita, where the items of knowledge are being described. And at the 18, the last item he summarizes is, one should become a scientist or philosopher and conduct research into spiritual knowledge, recognizing that spiritual knowledge is permanent, whereas material knowledge ends with the death of the body. So does it mean we all got to go and try to get a PhD? That's probably not possible, also not required. But essentially, what are the activities of a scientist? What are the activities of a philosopher? You know, what are they doing essentially? They experiment, yes, but in the first place they ask questions. You know, philosophers, the thinkers, you know, they ask questions. They're like some big main. They're the main questions in philosophy, or like, what can I know? For example, what shall I do? What can I hope for? What was the one? There was a fourth big. What is the human being? Huh? Like this. However, they're like big main questions that are being asked, and people contemplate like to the maximum of their capacity, try to answer those questions. Also, your Prabhupada says, also spiritual life starts with truly asking questions, conscious questions about your existence. One question he always emphasizes, why do I suffer? I should inquire into that. Or who am I? I should inquire into that. What's the purpose of this life? You know? So in this way we can certainly become philosophers, even though we do not study philosophy in a sense of university degrees, but also scientists who gives himself to a process of realization and always forms hypothesis and like does an experiment and evaluates what at the end comes out of it. We would say conscious living, not just like follow a routine or like without thinking, just obeying an authority. It's about applying it and see what comes out of it. You know, we also speak of symptoms of a self-realized person, and Arjuna asks that in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. He asks Krishna, how does a person who is situated in transcendence behave? How does he speak? How does he walk? How does he sit? Like, and there's a whole explanation by the acharyas what this all means. And Srila Prabhupada says, of course, in the first place, a person is recognized by how he or she speaks. What is he or she talking about? And he says, a fool remains undiscovered until he or she speaks. Like, so it's very important to use your capacity of language for the purpose of becoming conscious and understanding the essential questions of life, instead of like what we call prajalpa, you know, talking of whatever, things that have actually not really any substance, or it's just superficial talk, or like gossip, or whatever. So in this way, one can become a scientist and philosopher and conduct research into spiritual knowledge. So what we do now, like we study the Bhagavatam, the scriptures, we hear about it, and we are also encouraged, like, to among each other to discuss about these things. You know, in the Sangha, Srila Prabhupada also encouraged that. So, because the verse that we read is about those who are truly in knowledge of the material body, knowing it's only a manifestation of nescience, it said also ignorance, which is interesting, like as a concept, like is nescience a substance that I can touch? Of course we understand, like it's referring also to the modes of nature, material energy itself, the knowledge covering potency. So it is in fact a form of substance in terms of energy that is kind of laid over the consciousness of the self and makes it think, I am that material energy. So that's the nescience, so to speak, that covers us, and we like identify with it, as long as we are not awakening, don't awaken to the truth. And he says those who understand that, they do not become addicted to the body. That was a phrase in the shloka. And it's interesting, I thought about, or like, maybe you can shortly say, what is your understanding of addiction essentially? What is the nature of addiction or an addict? What comes to mind?
One knows it's not good, but cannot give it up.
One knows it is not good, but one can't give it up. Yes, that's one essential item. Yeah. Besides the negative effects, psychologically, physiologically, sociologically, one anyway does it. You wanted to say?
Always contemplating on that object.
Also, of course, yeah. We might even say obsessing about the things that you're addicted to. And they're not just substances. You know, we might think in the first place of substances like drugs and things, but there are also other things like one can be addicted to, like internet and so many other stuff. Food. Good food is also substance. Yeah. But there's also addiction to recognition and all that. Is striving. I constantly need attention, for example, like, or whatever. So addiction is like an excessive behavior, usually where I'm not in control anymore. I'm dependent on whatever I'm addicted to, and I follow the dictate of that urge. And despite the destructive consequences, I go on. So what does it mean to become addicted to the body? Like, is despite all the suffering it brings, we still remain attached. Although we can see so many struggles that come, we kind of either brush them off or feel we can compensate them, or like then we have a period of happiness, of material happiness. And in this way we remain, or we like the connection, or like in this term, the addiction to it. We don't give it up because we still have faith in it. Śrīla Prabhupada in the purport also says, like, illusion means that we have to believe that we will attain, what is he? I found he phrased it very interesting. When we think that sense gratification will help us, we are in illusion. So taking shelter, so to speak, of that. And we all do that. I do it, in order to pacify the mind when the mind struggles out of whatever reason. That might sometimes be stuff like boredom. That might be just dissatisfaction. It might be anxiety, might be whatever. Yeah, what helps, if you somehow or other gratify your senses in order to divert your focus from that, what you suffer from. Essentially, this is also what happens in drug addiction on a deeper level. There's a lot of struggle, suffering, and we say, in English there's this term numb. You make something numb. You try to be unaware of it, like a painkiller, and it also numbs your pain in the body. So that's what we try to do. But then this is not the primary. The problem isn't solved. The source of pain isn't solved. Just the symptom is being treated. So then there is a distinction also between primary problems and secondary problems. And mostly, or like often, we deal with the secondary problem, like for example an addiction. It's not the actual problem. behind every addiction is a core problem that is not being dealt with. Therefore, the addiction is there as an compensatory item. So here it says, those who truly understand the actual need of the self and try to enter self-realization and try to find satisfaction also in the self by the process of bhakti yoga, they can gradually give up the addiction because they address the primary problem, which is the need of the self to be spiritually nurtured, to be recognized, because we struggle from not seeing ourselves. We run around and, who am I? And then we get to, try to identify with this or enter into that role. Because what do? Have you tried to sit down, just be meditating and try to turn your vision inside and try to see yourself? Have you done that sometimes? But maybe also while you chant or whatever. Did you see something? It's frustrating, isn't it? Yeah, it's a feeling where you also wonder, because it's dark. It's literally darkness inside you. You cannot, you cannot see it. And I also sometimes wonder, my impatience got a better me. Thought, oh my God, when finally will I get some realization of that? This true self. I want to see it. And that can be off-putting to not get the result that one desires in a spiritual practice. To truly have this vision, or like the Paramatma. Okay, I can think it into my mind, but it's not the same as truly seeing the super soul. So, but it's something we want to aim for. And Rupa Goswami advises us, one of the key items for success in spiritual life is utsahan nishchayat iryat. Besides the enthusiasm, utsahan, then nishchayat iryat, patience and confidence, he says. Confidence that you will attain the goal, and patience, it takes time. And practice and effort. And then, of course, tat karma pavartanat, or also to try to follow in the footsteps of the acharyas. And patience is a big challenge, I think. At least in my life, it is because it's not a patience in sense of, okay, wait a few days. And then it will come. I can wait a few days, no problem. But if you think of months and years, of course, it depends. The quality of my practice, of course, matters. If my practice is powerful, then the result might be. So this is a challenge to always get back to keeping the faith and enthusiasm by also being patient, but also remain confident in scripture and the process, so that this will come. And we get also some concrete instructions how one can attain to a deeper level of self-realization without having attained already this deeper satisfaction of the mind. And in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, where do we have it? It is described, just give me a second here. An analogy is given. It says, an expert horseman desiring to tame the headstrong horse first lets the horse have his way for a moment, and then, pulling the reins, gradually places the horse on the desired path. Similarly, the Supreme Yoga process is that by which one carefully observes the movements and desires of the mind and gradually brings them under full control. And that the purport talks about you cannot be too strong on the horse, it will just throw you off, but you can also not be too lenient, it will just run off somewhere else. So it's about mind control. But I want to focus on the first. After that, it's text 22 in 11.10.22. Until one's mind is fixed in spiritual satisfaction, one should analytically study the temporary nature of all material objects. Jai Jagannath Baladev Subhacha Devi ki jai, Shri Shri Gaunitai ki jai. Whether cosmic, earthly, or atomic, one should constantly observe the process of creation through the natural progressive function and the process of annihilation through the regressive function. So we are advised, unless our mind is not really fixed or attracted to spiritual satisfaction, it means also contemplation, meditation on the self, one should observe that carefully, that the mind is absorbed in, like all the phenomenal world, all the bodies, like one's own body, and pay attention to the process of creation through the natural progressive function and the process of annihilation through the regressive function. Because what is the aim of it? To understand the temporary nature and to be really conscious of it. Often what happens, illusion is based on, the power of illusion is the lack of awareness how it is illusion, or how something appears real but is not truly real. Like in magic, like a magic trick, if a magician, as long as you don't know how it works, you will be impressed. But as soon as you know how it works, you think, okay, it's a trick. And sometimes you might know it's a trick, but you don't know how it works exactly, So, but the key point is, it's the awareness. Illusion lives from unawareness. So an awareness comes from, first of all, being a conscious observer of things. And that's also what the mode of passion, why the mode of passion is, in a sense, a very dangerous thing, because mode of passion means often not rush through things too quickly and to be too much restless and like here and there, not all over the place perhaps, but like sattva guna means be present, be conscious, be focused, be centered, and be aware of what's exactly happening. And then when I observe it and be conscious of it, then I can see it properly, instead of if I'm just rushing or superficially looking at things, or not looking at things at all. There will be mode of ignorance. I don't pay attention to, don't observe carefully. In therapy also often we work in this way, that people become conscious observers of what's going on right now in the body, in the mind. And often simply by that process people think, oh yeah, I haven't noticed before. Or now when I think of it, I become aware that. Maybe a behavioral pattern or whatever. But it starts with being able to be present, be an observer of things. And here the purport says, I skipped this one verse they quote. Until one has established one's consciousness on the liberated platform of perfect knowledge, one must constantly ward off the attacks of illusion through rigid analytic observation of material nature. The material mind might be attracted to sex. Therefore, by spiritual intelligence, one should scrutinize the temporary nature of one's own body and the body that has artificially become the object of one's material lust. One may apply this rigid analysis to all material bodies, from the fantastic cosmic body of Lord Brahma down to that of the most insignificant germ. So, trying to understand that each type of body has essentially the same nature and same destiny, will be devoured by time and is in itself a product of nescience, or like material energy. As previously stated by Lord Krishna, one who is advanced in Krishna consciousness spontaneously avoids sense gratification and is constantly drawn by spiritual love into his relationship with Lord Krishna. One who has not achieved the platform of spontaneous Krishna consciousness must remain constantly vigilant so as not to be grossly cheated by the material energy of the Lord. One who tries to exploit the material energy ruins his spiritual life and experiences varieties of miseries. So the miseries here are as a result of nescience. We also say the reason why we struggle and suffer is since the influence of ignorance, or avidya, and we constantly get fooled by material nature and invest our faith in her, in the body, and then at the end get rewarded with suffering, although there is an amount of pleasure. It's kind of, you have that, but the proportions like are very different. You have little amount. There's also this called some kind of style of Erziehungsstil, raising someone, like it's with sugar, bread, and whip. Give something sweet and then and the whip, like in this kind of, also have the promise of a reward of satisfaction, convinces the mind it's okay to endure the suffering. that's a mentality we can maybe observe, the hope for, like there's a promise in material nature, there's a promise of there's some happiness and something I get out of it, and it's worth to go through the struggle. That might be a deep conviction we might all have in our minds, that we think it's worth it, right? I mean, otherwise, what makes you going? And the suffering is an interesting aspect in itself. Recently also we did some seminar on the how suffering can be also a impetus for spiritual advancement. And also in the Sri Ishopanishad, Srila Prabhupada, in a purport to verse 11, which says like one should understand nescience and transcendental knowledge side by side. One should understand the functions of both process of knowledge simultaneously. He says, just give me a second. I read the whole part. From his kingdom, the personality of Godhead sends his bona fide servants to propagate this message by which one can return to Godhead, and sometimes the Lord comes himself to do this work. Since all living beings are his beloved sons, his parts and parcels, God is more sorry than we ourselves to see the sufferings we are constantly undergoing in this material condition. The miseries of this material world serve to indirectly remind us of our incompatibility with that matter. I read the sentence again. The miseries of this material world serve to indirectly remind us of our incompatibility with that matter. Intelligent living entities generally take note of these reminders, conscious observing, and engage themselves in the culture of vidya, or transcendental knowledge. Human life is the best opportunity for the culture of spiritual knowledge, and a human being who does not take advantage of this opportunity is called a Naradama, the lowest of human beings. So indirectly reminding us of the incompatibility of ourselves with matter. So I think that's a very productive way to look at suffering, as having the function of reminding us, trying to make us aware. Here you try to connect things that don't fit together. In German you say also eckige Schrauben in runde Löcher drehen. You try to have like screws that are maybe a square, and you try to put them in a round hole. It won't work. So in that way, to have in mind, like we try to combine things in the material world that cannot be truly combined. The nature of the self and nature of the body. And here the verse of the Upanishad indicates one should study both, as the verse 2:16 of the Bhagavad Gita says, Na sato vidyate bhavo na bhavo vidyate sataha. Sat and asat is being used. Na sato, that which has no existence, and that which has existence, the self, has been recognized through the study of the nature of both, so that one understands material nature and spiritual nature simultaneously by different processes, philosophical understanding, but spiritual practice, and methods of awareness raising, we would say, and to become conscious of these things and be critical, sober observers of our own bodies and minds, and also always pay attention. In the Bhagavad Gita also it's described the self-realized person when he eats or sleeps, takes something in or lets something out. He always is aware that only the body is busy with its, or the senses are only busy with its sense objects, but he himself has nothing to do with it. Kind of the bodily machine runs its program and it's nothing to do with us. Like to be this observer and seeing all that what happens there in this body, even perceptions and things, it's not me. I always actually observe these things and my body runs its program. But sometimes I'm more absorbed in it and other times not. Or you can see like little things, tapasya, the idea what we do is to expose ourselves to pleasant and unpleasant circumstances. Srila Prabhupada often says tapasya, or like, what's the English word? No, not renunciation, but like austerity, yes, means to voluntarily accept inconvenience, physical inconvenience. Like simply you can in the morning you take shower, like okay, pleasant, warm shower. You go in and like, oh nice, it's cold, it's winter. Cold shower, unpleasant. Maybe you don't do it. But try, like if you do it both, or like only the unpleasant also can be, and observe yourself what happens deep within the mind, in the self. And if you're conscious, you can see for the deeper self, it doesn't matter whether you shower cold or hot. It's the mind that has an issue with if it's cold or hot. But actually behind that, like, if you really try to be observant, this was just one example. There can be many other examples, but just like remember it from, because I'm trying to practice this more, like this little type of inconvenience to that, or like with fasting sometimes, your mind freaks out, oh, I'm hungry, but at some point it forgets about it and feels even good. Oh, good, my body's not so full, Still, consequently, actually, our whole language must change, because if we want to be very consequent, we always must speak of, my mind just thinks like that, my body just wants this, instead of I need this or I need that. But it's kind of weird, I guess, to talk like this. But sometimes it's maybe good to particularly also use language in a way that distinguishes yourself from body and mind. So for awareness raising. Yes, and Vishnu, here instructs instructs King Prithu on this very subject matter. Saying if one advances more in this understanding of what is the actual nature of the body and what is the actual nature of the self, one can get rid of the addiction to the material body. Hare Krishna. Are there any comments or questions?
Another wonderful analytical, philosophical presentation. In this verse, you also repeated the line, addicted to the body. It seems to me that Lord Vishnu, who is saying these words, is referring to Indra. He's telling basically indirectly to Prithu Maharaj, you see, here's this Indra. He's ignorant who is addicted to the body, but you should not be like him. I don't know if that's what comes to you as well.
Yeah, it would be my understanding as well that he actually appeals to King Prithu's higher understanding, saying, you are actually not on that level, so please remember that. But Indra, in that sense, he acted based on the addiction. There's also something, what does addicts do? Criminal behavior at some point, because it's just that the urge is too strong, and if you don't have legally the money or whatever to get what you need, you either rob and steal and do whatever. In German you say Beschaffungskriminalität. I don't know whether there's a translation now for the English one. But the crimes resulting from the need to try to get the things that you're addicted to. And Indra was willing to just sabotage the whole sacrifice.
Also a question you mentioned about this, volume is too high. Conscious awareness. Mm-hmm. That's something we should, if you can bring the volume a little down. If you can, you emphasized
awareness,
how it is something that we should cultivate and practice very carefully, and also you go that where was this quote from 11th canto, right? That until we feel
observance, the rigid
satisfaction,
until the mind has attained spiritual satisfaction.
Right. We should always be like almost like Sankhya yogis, right? Always apply Sankhya and the knowledge. And but in order to be conscious observer, it's absolutely necessary. One has to be in the mode of goodness. Otherwise, you don't have access to that type of state of consciousness, even where you can observe. You're just like puppet of your urges or mind in the mode of passion and ignorance. So my question is: seems like it's so necessary to become, for everyone on a spiritual path, to become that conscious observer at one point, that therefore Srila Prabhupada and Krishna in Bhagavad Gita dedicated so many chapters and verses for describing three modes of nature, so that we study it very carefully, and then we start to recognize, and then we step by step we gradually can elevate ours to the mode of goodness, where we can become a conscious observer. Is that? This is like understanding.
I would agree.
I came to.
Yes, because when you say the Bhagavad Gita also describes the three modes of nature, and what is the symptom of sattva guna? You know, the symptom is knowledge, like which knowledge also in the sense of awareness, truth, and also health. You know, sattva. Sattva is that what maintains. Sat also is there, like what is true consciousness. You know, and yes, the more sattva is there, the more the possibility is there to be this conscious observer. But even though we are like a person is strongly influenced by passion and ignorance, we also learn from the three modes. They are always in some kind of interaction. Sometimes this mode dominates another, and there's always at least a pinch of sattvic capacity. And the idea is to try to find that and increase it. I'm also not capable, like to whatever. I have my moments where I feel okay, now I use them, then I can absorb it more. But then, Rajas and Tamas kicks in. But yes, to try to catch these moments particularly, or like make an effort to create a moment. You know, because when we always wait for the moments, they might not really come. But we can try to create these moments where we say, okay, if it's just 5 minutes of some particular contemplation, say, now I just meditate on that, or I sit and just try to, be present with what I'm doing, and something like this. Or like with the chanting, okay, the ambition might be, I want to chant all my 16 rounds in a very conscious, present way. Might be rather tough, but what about if I say, okay, now I chant particularly one round with kind of full focus, and then comes the next round, and I decide again, in order to have this kind of little goals to, of quality increase, so to speak. In that way, to gradually increase the sattvic capacity.
With the help of that knowledge that are given.
Yeah, also, sometimes it might just be nice to, I personally took pleasure sometimes in just learning one shloka that I find very interesting, the Sanskrit, and try to always, sometimes just in order to keep it fresh, to just also in the mind repeatedly chant it, and then try to, okay, what is the translation, maybe read it up again, and try to also, the word by word sometimes is very interesting, if you know the words a bit, and then just try to remember, and even if it's just a repetitive kind of thing, you try to get the shloka, automatically you think about what it's saying, and then in this way it could be something that spontaneously causes you to realize something that you wouldn't have realized otherwise in a daily business, maybe become aware of something or notice something that we wouldn't have noticed otherwise. Like this. Hare Krishna. Any other comment, Devashri?
I had 2 questions, and actually also a comment when you said we have to constantly remind ourselves in these short, and then I learned, then I got reminded that we learned this Pomodoro effect of time management, where you do like 25 minutes of concentration, then take a break, 25 minutes of concentration. So it's actually an accomplished and well-tested way that you do this reinforcement of these, let's say, sattvic practices again and again. Then it has more effect. So that's something I wanted to share, that it actually works. Because when I was writing, I did this, the 25 minutes of writing, 5 minutes of break, 25. And the work quality was much better also. And my questions were relating to, because in the beginning of the lecture you had mentioned how, 2 things you had said, how that in some traditions, self-realizations, you only see aspects of the self. And then you also mentioned how self-realization comes through Krishna realization. That I found very beautiful. But at the same time, like Prabhupada would often say how it is difficult to understand Krishna. And sometimes even in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam we discuss, we don't understand it, we're like, yeah, we cannot understand it. And then I come to think perhaps even self-realization in completion, at least in our condition. I don't know if it's, maybe you can elaborate if it's fully possible, like this full self-realization.
I certainly believe it is possible, and the scriptures not just assert it is possible, we are even urged to aim for it, and it's even said it would be our responsibility in human life to attain that. I think what is important also, or even more important is, but it depends on revelation. So of course we don't attain it by our own effort and power. Our efforts and our power, like if they're used with devotion in the practice, like the example of Lord Brahma is, I think, very nicely illustrating that. You know, he performed great tapasya, like had a lot of capacity. You know, like he's the intelligent being in the universe. And at the end, like what happened by his efforts, he pleased the Lord, and so the Lord felt pleased to show himself to him. So, but not that he kind of by his power forced Krishna like this, you know, but Krishna chose to show himself to his devotee who fully dedicated himself to him. So that's something also like to think of often. It's like, I depend on that Krishna wants to show himself to me, or like that he also allows that I might see my true self. So getting in the mood of kind of prayer, and please, like similar like Bhaktivinoda Thakur prays for some things where he says, when will the day come that I, you know, attain taste for chanting, for example. And similarly, to pray, to finally, please Krishna, help me to see you, I depend on you, I cannot reach myself, but please bestow your blessings on me so that I might one day be able to truly see the things as they are. I'm not capable, but if you choose to bless me with divine vision, we say in the morning we glorify the spiritual master, that actually through him ignorance is removed and he bestows the vision, transcendental vision. Divnya Gyan, Nrida Prokrasito, actually knowledge is revealed within the heart. And what does that mean? The mind or the heart starts to truly see things by the mercy of Guru and Krishna. Yeah. But then again the patience kicks in, or the impatience. Yeah. Is that satisfying you?
Thank you. I had yet another question that it's very beautiful because I try and listen to Prabhupada every morning, and then in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam something that Prabhupada said. Because this morning I was listening and Prabhupada talked about chewing the chewed, and it's so similar to this addiction of the body or to the body. And then I was really contemplating on this matter of where the mind goes and urges and all of these factors. And I realized that, yes, of course, constant absorption is important. And also after we make certain experiences, we know that, okay, we understand the temporary nature of things also. But then sometimes I'm just so also frustrated with the fact that, okay, yes, constant reminders are important, but how foolish am I that, like, even after so many things that we hear and experience, but it's still... So I like sometimes I really think that, because when you listen to Prabhupada, it's so convincing, and then you read the books, and also when you practice, it's so convincing, but then still there are these moments of weaknesses, and then I feel a little hopeless, like after so much, if I don't understand, then what is the hope?
Yeah. Then we can practice Vishada Yoga, the yoga of lamentation. You know, as Arjuna did in the first chapter, he was in deep crisis, like representing us. And yeah, I mean, I can perfectly relate to what you say. You know, realizing my incapacity to keep up the standard, or like to, you know, to remain mentally focused and just being diverted by this and that, and then to I think what we can practice as well is to use these moments as an opportunity to talk to Krishna, pray to Krishna, and just show ourselves in that state of helplessness, and then there can be a good possibility or like an opportunity to a more genuine surrender. You know, because I feel like I'm at my limits. Because as Krishna, as we read from the purport, Krishna is even more sorry than for our suffering than we are for ourselves. And he will certainly reciprocate. And some stuff I think we just also have to go through. It's our karma. Thank you.
Sorry. Why this came into my mind also was because like in today's calendar code, Prabhupada gave an instruction that we should build character, and from this character purity will come. And then I'm thinking, how does this character building process actually happen? Because like if you still see weaknesses and then you try to work upon them, and then you think, okay, yes, I've worked upon them, but then they are still there.
Mm-hmm.
So how does this character building really happen? I mean, it just came to
Well,
my mind.
I think the books are written about that. It's a more thorough process, but maybe a short thing can give us a essential characteristic. Like often this is quoted, some say it's from the Talmud, then again not. But like this whole kind of line of, it's starting with the thoughts, that one should be aware of the thoughts because they become words, and then become activities, and then become character, and this becomes destiny. So to redirect and consciously choose our thinking and speaking. Also, this is what was mentioned, one of the qualities of a self-realized person. How do we recognize that? Is like the way he or she speaks. What is the topic of speech? What is the way of talking? Conscious communication, that's what we also sattvic communication. And there's like the 5 austerities of speech mentioned in 1715, whereas I forgot the Sanskrit, but it's like non-agitating, truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and always residing in Vedic literature. So character building, I think it starts with like being conscious of our thinking, and also consciously rethink things, or try to take different perspectives also. If, for example, if you talk of being critical or maybe feeling envious, and then turning your mind into, maybe you can acknowledge that, and maybe one thing could be look inside yourself and say, okay, I'm anxious or fearful, and why can I not just like let go of it, but then also toward the person to consciously act like appreciative and supportive. And in this way, choose another response to the mind's impulse, and the more one does that, the more it becomes natural. But also in itself, if it's not feels so natural, if it's a genuine intention to say, okay, I recognize actually this quality, this either critical mind or like envious mind or anxious mind is not, I don't like it anymore, though it's there. And if the intention is genuine, then the result will also be good, and you can, try to make a difference in like responding to the urge. I don't know, is this answering, or like help, like at least Hare Krishna. Alright. Thank you very much. Grant our Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai.